Here is a metaphysical description and a history of only those planets of our solar system upon which individual mind-body-spirit complexes have been, are, or shall be experienced. You may understand the other spheres to be a part of the logos. We take the one known as Venus. This planetary sphere was one of rapid evolution. It is Ra's native Earth, and the rapidity of the progress of the mind-body-spirit complexes upon its surface was due to harmonious interaction. They were a small population which dwelt upon what we would consider difficult conditions. Those of them which had the gift of polarity felt deep compassion for those who seemed to dwell in darkness. This description is most apt, as theirs was a harshly bright planet in the physical sense. There was every attempt made to reach out, with whatever seemed to be needed. However, those upon the positive path have the comfort of companions, and those of Ra spent a great deal of their attention upon the possibilities of achieving spiritual or metaphysical adepthood, or work in indigo ray, through the means of relationships with other selves. Consequently, the compassion for those in darkness was balanced by the appreciation of the light. To those who wished to sleep, they could only offer those comforts designed for the sleeping. Service was only possible to the extent it was requested. They were ready to serve in whatever way they could. This still seemed satisfactory as a means of dealing with other selves in third density. It was their feeling that to be each entity which one attempted to serve was to simplify the grasp of what service was necessary or possible. Their harvest was overwhelmingly positive, and their appreciation of those which were negative was relatively uninformed. There were, however, those upon the planetary surface during third density whose vibratory patterns were in the negative range, but were not harvestable. They had no negative harvest as such, although there had been two entities which had harvested themselves during the third density, in the negative or service-to-self path. They used the technique of control over others and domination unto the physical death. Upon a planetary influence, much in used to slaughter, these entities were able to polarize by this means. Upon our third density environment, at the time of our experiencing, such entities would merely be considered, shall we say, ruthless despots which waged the holy war. These entities were wanderers from early positive fifth density and incarnated male and female, as this is by far the most efficient system of partnership. It was in the second cycle of 25,000 years. They had a harvest of 6 out of 30 millions, to speak roughly, of mind-body-spirit complexes, less than 20%. Wanderers are always drawn to whatever percentage has not yet polarized, and come when there is a call. There was a call from those which were not positively polarized as such, but which sought to be positively polarized and sought wisdom, feeling the compassion of other selves upon Venus, as complacent or pitying towards other selves. In their peoples there was what may be considered, from the viewpoint of wisdom, an overabundance of love. These entities looked at those still in darkness and saw that those of a neutral or somewhat negative viewpoint found such harmony, shall we say, sickening. The wanderers felt that a more wisdom-oriented way of seeking love could be more appealing to those in darkness. First, one entity began its work. Quickly, the second found the first. These entities had agreed to serve together, and so they did, glorifying the one Creator, but not as they intended. About them were soon gathered those who found it easy to believe that a series of specific knowledges and wisdoms would advance one towards the Creator. The end of this was the graduation into fourth density negative of the wanderers, which had much power of personality, and some small deepening of the negatively polarized element of those not polarizing positively. There was no negative harvest as such. These two entities were disconcerted and worked with the fourth density negative for some period until, within this framework, the previously learned patterns of the self had been recaptured and the polarity was, with great effort, reversed. There was a great deal of fourth density positive work, then to be retraced. These entities joined Ra, in fourth density positive, for a portion of the cycle which they experienced. By the end of the third density cycle, the population was 35 or so million. About 10% of the population graduated to the fourth density, and the rest repeated the third density. Then Venus became a positive fourth density planet. And harmonious graduation accelerated their experience. They gained the intense compassion in fourth density. It later became a fourth-fifth density planet. Both fourth and fifth density experiences were possible upon the planetary influence of what we call Venus. Then later a fifth density planet for a large measure of our time. In the fifth density, they spent much of their time balancing wisdom with the firmly cemented compassion of a strong and helpful nature. They again harmoniously graduated to the sixth density. Their sixth density work was also accelerated because of the harmony of their social memory complex, so that they were able to set out as members of the Confederation to even more swiftly approach graduation to seventh density. The harvest for them will be in only approximately 2.5 million years, as we measure time, and it is their desire to be ready for harvest as it approaches in their space-time continuum. Their harmony, however, has been a grievous source of naivete as regards working with our planet. It is their honor duty to attempt to remove the distortions that the use of this pyramid shape has caused in the thinking of our peoples and in the activities of some of our entities. They did not deny that such shapes were efficacious, nor did they withhold the general gist of this efficacy. However, they wished to offer their understanding, limited though it was, that contrary to their naive beliefs, many thousands of years ago, the optimum shape for initiation did not exist. When they were aided by sixth density entities during their own third density experiences, they being less bellicose in the extreme, found this teaching to be of help. In their naivete in third density, they had not developed the interrelationships of our barter or money system and power. They were, in fact, a more philosophical third density planet than our own, and their choices of polarity were much more centered about, shall we say, the understanding of sexual energy transfers and the appropriate relationships between self and other self. They spent a much larger portion of their space-time working with the unmanifested being. In this less complex atmosphere, it was quite instructive to have this learned teaching device, and they benefited without the distortions they found occurring among our peoples. They have recorded these differences meticulously in the great record of creation, that such naivete shall not be necessary again. Although it would be possible for them to move at will throughout the creation within this logos, that is to say, so-called the Milky Way galaxy, they have moved where they were called to service. These locations being, shall we say, local, and including Alpha Centauri, planets of our solar system, which we call the Sun, Cepheus, and Zeta Reticuli. To these sublogoi they have come, having been called. There are wanderers from other major galaxies, drawn to the specific needs of a single call. There are those among their social memory complex, which have become wanderers in other major galaxies. Thus, there has been knowledge of other major galaxies, for to one whose personality or mind-body-spirit complex has been crystallized, the universe is one place, and there is no bar upon travel. However, they have not traveled to another major galaxy, nor do they contemplate it, for they can reach in love with their hearts. They have opened their hearts, in radiation of love to the entire creation. Approximately 90% of the creation is, at some level, aware of the sending and able to reply. All of the infinite logoi are one in the consciousness of love. This is the type of contact which they enjoy rather than travel. This planet's the third density conditions are not hospitable to the life forms of our peoples. Its core vibrational frequency is sixth density. However, they as a social memory complex had elected to leave that influence. Therefore, the beings inhabiting this planetary influence at this space-time are fifth density entities. The planet may be considered a fifth-sixth density planet. The fifth and sixth dimensions of that planetary sphere are quite conducive to growing, learning, teaching.